the Warren Talk 1010. I'm your host, Ava Cheslow, with my lovely co-host,
Kaya Federico. And today we have many brilliant,
fantastic,
intelligent,
overall amazing human beings
giving us the breakdown of the news around the world today. Shortly, we will be going live to our reporters Adam and Oscar to talk about our recent COVID-19 updates.
I wonder what that's going to be about.
India's COVID crisis is the worst we've seen internationally, with over 27 million recorded infections and a recorded 319,000 deaths, although numbers are likely even worse than this. Because of the government's claim that they beat the virus in the first wave, India was unpleasantly surprised at the devastation that came with the second. More contagious variants with almost no vaccinations in the country, combined with a large amount of mass gatherings, created what was referred to as the perfect storm for COVID-19 to run rampant. The crisis in India is starting to get better, but the lasting impact it is having on the rest of the world is very clear. Evidence of this is everywhere. For example, there were about 50 passengers that tested positive for COVID-19 on just one recent flight from New Delhi to Hong Kong, and there are more examples of this happening around the world. This means that international travel will need to be put on hold longer than expected for everyone. But these aren't the only concerns. Because of the massive amounts of infection, many new variants have leaked from India into other countries. There is one variant that stands out. Known as variant B.1.617, it has been considered a double mutant because it is slightly more transmissible and it is harder for our antibodies to block out. This variant is still being studied and is likely not to be an escape mutation, which would mean that it couldn't be stopped by the vaccines. The vaccines are being rolled out quite slowly in India, so it's important that the rest of the world stays safe and alert to try and prevent any further outbreaks for the time being. There are also many economic implications for India and the world. As the world's fifth largest economy that has been putting out very strong numbers in recent years, it's no surprise that their economic downturn as a result of this pandemic would have a large effect on the world. India reported 10% decrease in their growth, with a 4% decrease in growth internationally. The crisis in India is also a problem for vaccine rollouts in other places. India is a large producer of vaccine and is producing a large amount of the world's COVID-19 vaccines and already had to shut down exports for a brief time. This has left many countries, including the United Kingdom, very vulnerable and put a large delay on the return to normal. It is becoming increasingly apparent that countries around the world need to provide India with more support to help them back on their feet, for the health and safety of themselves as well as India's. The crisis India is facing remains to be one of the worst in the world today, but it seems that their cases are starting to decline slowly, and hopefully they will soon be back on their feet.
Tonight, the psychology of anti-vaxxers and why they're becoming more and more relevant. 3 people were arrested last Saturday, where one was charged with common nuisance, one with failing to comply with an undertaking, and the third was given a provincial offense ticket. That leads us to the question, why are anti-vaxxers becoming more and more common nowadays? Well, it turns out most of the anti-vaxxers may not have been disbelievers in the science of vaccines to begin with. According to Timothy Caulfield, they were part of the movable middle, which are individuals who are initially on the fence and can be swayed by information that taps into their confirmation bias. Unfortunately, because many of the protesters' actions are rooted in deep emotion, Steve Jordans and David Hauser, who are both psychology experts, say it will be counterproductive to bulldoze over their feelings and present them with further facts and numbers. If we really want people to comply, the approach of using numbers, rules, facts, and data won't work. All that information links to our frontal lobe. Our frontal lobe is exhausted. We have to talk to our limbic system, which is the emotional part of our brain. The idea of being an anti-vaxxer is also becoming more and more popular due to social media. In March, the Center for Countering Digital Hate found that 12 anti-vaxxer accounts labeled the Disinformation Dozen were responsible for 2/3 of vaccine disinformation. But defying lockdowns because you're fatigued by the pandemic is completely different than what many of these protesters are doing. Many of these protesters are denying the science behind masks, vaccines, and lockdowns. Psychology experts say the difference between the two groups of people is striking. Their actions seem so counter-rational that it is almost certainly emotionally fueled. This is most certainly an example of a theory called the appraisal theory of emotion, and it says when bad things happen to you, you try to figure out who's at fault. If you can't find someone else to blame, then you feel sadness. But if you can find someone else to blame, you feel anger towards them. In this case, there are a lot of people who have lost their jobs and lost their way of living. And with the government locking things down, they have somebody to blame right in front of them. An integral part of humanity is forming connections, and deniers seem to have found a sense of community in these protests. You can now find people with the same attitude as you anywhere on the internet, and find a way to connect with them by simply going to protests. If you can't find people to share these ideas with, you can simply just go to the internet and find the information. Caulfield says science and those who would disseminate it need to move smarter and faster than misinformation. This means getting creative with messaging in a shareable and engaging way. He said that the best way to get information out there quickly is to get on the social media platforms that everyone's on and show real and factual information so people can be properly educated. Conforming to the health restrictions needed to curb the spread of COVID-19 is not a walk in the park. We're not allowed to hang out with friends, go to restaurants, or visit distant family. But if we want to be able to do these things, we need to conform to these restrictions and not do the opposite in hopes the government will listen. In having these large group protests, it is just making the situation worse and making our economy worse by keeping businesses closed, as we will continue to be in lockdown. I'm Oscar Kelly.
Thank you for sharing your stories on our recent COVID-19 updates. But
Looks like we're not going anywhere thanks to our little anti-vaxxer friends.
next we're going to be going live to our brilliant reporters Jamie and Reese, Quinton, Sam, Leandra, and Luigi
On different events regarding our economy.
Thank you very much. Breaking news. UK proposing Australia a new trade deal. The UK is expected to offer Australia a trade deal under which both countries would phase out taxes on imports over the next 15 years. The cabinet was reportedly split on what terms to propose, amid concerns Australian beef and lamb farmers could be undercut by the larger UK producers. But the dispute was apparently resolved after Boris Johnson pushed for unity. International Trade Secretary Liz Truss will formally make the UK offer to Australian counterpart later on Friday. If accepted, it would also lead to quotas, limits, tax-free trade between the two countries to be phased out. The National Farmers Union, also known as the NFU, has warned that freeing up the UK-Australian meat will lead to hundreds of Australian cow and sheep breeders going out of business. Now going down to George on the ground where the protests are happening in Australia.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm down in the down under in Australia. And I know this suit's a little tight. I had to get rid of the pants because quarantine, my driver's been acting up over quarantine. But now I'm here live on the ground with two protesters from Australia.
Stop the trade! Stop the trade! No foreign meat! No foreign meat!
Okay,
Stop the trade! Stop the trade!
I'm here with two people on the ground. What would you guys like to say?
Well, g'day, man. How we doing out there? I'm sick. I'm just happy with my Vegemite. I don't want any foreign meat here in down under here in Australia. Okay. Just my Fosters and my Vegemite. I'm happy. No meat. Stop the trade.
I'm so sad. So many people are going to lose their businesses. So many people are going to lose their businesses.
And their jobs.
And their jobs.
Stop
the trade.
Okay,
stop the trade.
Stop the
Thank you. Sorry about that. There's so many protesters. Our camera cut out. But going back to you, Chuck.
Thank you for that, George. There are many stakeholders in this trade agreement, such as the UK and Australia making their imports and exports decrease and increase, the farmers from Australia and UK, one having their imports decrease and one potentially going out of business, and lastly, other countries such as Canada, because their export of meat that they send to both the United Kingdom and Australia would decrease due to this trade.
As part of overall free trade deal, Australia wants to access the UK food market without tariffs, which are taxes on imports, or quotas, which are limits on the amount that can be traded. This would make it easier and cheaper for big Australian farms to export products such as lamb and beef to the UK. In return, British farmers and other companies would enjoy the same access to the Australian market, but what's the free trade is all about? A deal with the UK would also be an important stepping stone, the government says, towards joining a wider Asian-Pacific Free Trade Agreement, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, also known as the CPTPP, which could provide Australian farmers with huge opportunities.
Farmers are the heart of society. Most people would assume farmers live a peaceful life far away from the hustle and bustle of big cities and modern problems. Well, things are changing. Farmers have been integrating technology for years now, and while we have smart cars, they have smart tractors. These machines are a tremendous help in the field, as it helps the farmers with spacing crops to optimize growth. But like anything, tractors do break. And this is where the problem lies. In order to buy a tractor, you need to go to a dealership, and since the tractor has smart technology, it's near impossible to repair without the proper diagnostic tools. Repairing the tractor at the dealership is also not a viable option, as the tractor weighs well over 15,000 pounds, and loading the tractor would cost the farmers over $2,000 just to get the tractor to the dealership and from. Repairing the tractor is also quite expensive at the dealership as well, due to the dealership having a monopoly on repairs, so they can charge an extremely high premium. John Deere is one of the biggest manufacturers for farm equipment. They're also the most notorious for charging high premiums for fixing said equipment. John Deere has a majority of the market share for all farm equipment, as well as having a monopoly on the repair for their own equipment as well. The profits from all this combined is very valuable, and is why they can be so innovative. Farmers are resorting to hacking the tractors in order to repair them. This is against the terms of service of many different manufacturers. These farmers are outraged at how they have to jump through hoops in order to use a product that they paid for. They have led the right to repair of movement and have been pleading for the legal action of the US government. The outcome of this battle will ripple out into almost all countries, affecting the world over. If the smart industry wins the preceding legal battle, they will continue to have a monopoly on repairs and maintenance. The software companies will continue to charge a higher premium, and then the farmers would have no choice but to follow their rules and pay the fees. This in turn will inflate the prices of many foods. This will raise the price of living everywhere, as every country needs to feed their citizens. If the farmers win, then the price of equipment will rise dramatically, as the manufacturers will need to raise the price in order to regain their lost profit. This will directly affect us, as iPhones and other smart devices will soon follow suit, as the legal battle will set a precedent that will affect the whole industry. Whatever happens, economies around the world will be altered. For example, the Canadian agriculture industry will take a giant hit if the software industry wins, and this will alter Canada's GDP greatly, as agriculture is responsible for 6.7% of Canadian GDP, which is roughly $100 billion. The inflation of price will deter potential buyers from importing Canadian products. Whether you think that the farmers have the right to repair, or the software industry has the right to keep ownership of their software after a sale, only time will tell what the consequences will be.
And for our next segment of the day, China replaces Germany as the UK's biggest import market. UK trade with the EU collapsed by 23.1% in the first 3 months of 2021. And trade with countries outside of the EU also dropped 0.8% over the same period. This reflects the new border checks on exports from the new Brexit deal with Brussels and the Boris Johnson government. This pandemic and Brexit have impacted trade with the UK and the EU, showing evidence of activity around ports dropping and UK exporters struggling with new paperwork. The spread of COVID-19 has created a big demand for textiles used for products like face masks and PPE, also known as personal protective equipment, that are imported from China. Also, demand for imports of Chinese electronics raised during COVID-19 lockdowns. Therefore, China surpassed Germany for the biggest import market for the UK. Germany was the UK's biggest import market since approximately 1997, excluding 6 months at the end of 2000 and the beginning of 2001, when the US took over.
However, in imports, Germany had begun declining since uncertainty with Brexit in 2019. The COVID-19 pandemic also correlated with Germany's decline, as Germany's car production and exports fell with the pandemic. Now, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson claims that the disruption with EU trade is temporary and shall be overcome as both sides work to develop a new trading relationship. However, many other strong business leaders oppose this and state that Brexit has come with a much higher cost and long-lasting irreversible consequences on the British economy. While it is difficult to disentangle the British impact with COVID-19, British companies have also been struggling with Britain leaving the EU, also known as Brexit. In fact, according to government statistics, the majority of companies state that their main business problems of 2020 were in fact caused by Brexit, replacing COVID-19 as the top challenge of the year. Figures show that trade with the UK and the EU collapsed by a quarter at the beginning of 2021, compared to statistics from 3 years prior, all due to Brexit and COVID-19 implications which hit exports. The world will continue to see COVID-19 and Brexit's implication with trade, especially for the EU and Britain. And that's all the time we have for today. Stay tuned for more.
Today we'll be keeping you updated with a new business news story discussing Quebec's new simple incorporation system and how it will affect Canada as a whole, and if this system would be a good fit for Canada, and the big question, should Canada embrace this new system?
Well, we all know small businesses are all around us, but did you know small businesses are the vital heart of our economy and also employ 2/3 of Canadian workers? But during this pandemic, it has been really hard on many small businesses financially and mentally. With Quebec's new simple incorporation system, it makes it easier for small businesses to incorporate to a corporation or a company by lessening paperwork and assisting costs with government support. These being the two main deterrents for incorporation, paperwork and costs, the new system encourages incorporation and provides support to those small businesses in need. A small business deciding to incorporate making the jump from a small business to a company or a corporation is huge and comes with benefits such as more access to capital due to you having both business assets and personal assets. Also, incorporation can also lower the business costs, increase employment and social security. But, on the other hand, a lot more cost and ongoing liabilities will make incorporation seem not so worth it or too risky. With there being small businesses all around us, there's even some in Burlington that we all know and love, like Ray's Convenience, Three Bills, Central Gardens, and Son of a Peach Pizzeria. Do you think they could benefit from Quebec's simple incorporation system or not? What do you think? Let us know at our website or on our Instagram.
It's also important to note that Quebec's simple incorporation system isn't perfect yet, and is still improving and changing over time constantly.
Some people believe other jurisdictions in Canada need to follow Quebec's lead, adjusting and perfecting the simple incorporation system. To do that, Quebec believes they need to deploy communication strategies that will resonate with small businesses, such as steps that would help drive economic recovery for small businesses. This ongoing pandemic has brought down many small businesses, and Quebec believes that this system will be what small businesses need for long-term prosperity. Plus, with some minor refinements, Quebec's system of incorporating small businesses is able and capable to be deployed across Canada, and some believe it should be. Quebec isn't the first to think of this incorporation system. Colombia also has a simplified corporation system, and it has brought huge success, economic growth, and thousands of new simplified corporations. Should all of Canada embrace Quebec's simple incorporation systems in the future?
If you enjoyed this business news story or found it insightful, well, be prepared for more business news and keep updated with Quebec's new incorporation system and international business.
Europe will soon be open to certain visitors. Many countries of the EU have voted to welcome vaccinated tourists or those from countries deemed COVID safe. But it's complicated. We have Luis Noia with us from Greece to break it down for us. So how will this exactly work and what needs to happen for it to actually take effect?
So yeah, European countries have officially agreed to welcome foreign tourists into the countries of the European Union as long as they've been fully vaccinated by one of the European approved vaccines. So far this includes the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. To be allowed to come in as a tourist, you would have had to have had your last dose of your vaccine at least 14 days in advance before your arrival in Europe. Ultimately, this is just an agreement between the countries, and legislators will have to come in and make this into law. Children who are usually excluded from vaccinations can travel to the European Union with their parents as long as they had a negative test no more than 72 hours before the arrival. And though it remains to be seen how every European nation will deal with this and how they will individually want to open their orders, this is definitely a good thing to see. One thing to note is that because of concerns over the health situation and how new variants that have been arising may cause more cases, the European countries have also agreed upon a new emergency brake, which means that if any individual country has some form of uptick in their cases, they can immediately just impose travel restrictions on that country very quickly.
We all know how tourism is among the most affected sectors from this pandemic. There have been huge changes in Europe's economy, but could you explain more in detail how things have been before COVID, during, and how is it expected to be when all these restrictions are gone?
So yeah, definitely. Tourism has become a large part of Southern Europe's domestic product, and so this pandemic has definitely hit them very hard, as a large part of their GDP contributions have just gone to nil when you see all these tourists are not allowed to come in, especially from places like England and the US and Canada. A lot of these countries, the tourism sector makes up more than 20% of their contribution to their GDP. And so you're going to see a lot of these businesses, a lot of these resorts, all of these bars in these beach areas, and you see Croatia, Greece, Portugal will have been hit very hard. A lot of them probably closed down. A lot of people are out of work because of this pandemic. So this new agreement coming in, talking about how tourists are going to be able to come in this summer. They're going to come in, they're going to contribute to the economy of these countries, going to contribute to the jobs being created here. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very happy about this, and I'm sure it's going to pressure a lot of legislators to allow their borders to open a little bit more. It's definitely a good thing to see in these countries, and I'm sure a lot of people are very happy about it.
That was Luis Noia from Greece with us. Thank you, Luis.
Hello everybody, my name is Zahra Sada. I'm coming from Ontario, Canada, and today's news story is about women in business. Our story comes from Africa. If you don't know, Africa leads the world in terms of numbers of women business owners. South Africa was one of the top scoring nations when it came to women having equal access to tertiary education, and it also scores higher than its African counterparts with regards financial inclusion, 86% compared with men. Uganda, Ghana, and Botswana have the highest percentage of women business owners in the world. The third edition of Mastercard Index of Women Entrepreneurs has listed 3 African countries as global leaders in terms of women-owned businesses. The story is about Julian Omala. She produces one of Uganda's most popular fruit drinks, sold under the brand name Cheers, and boasting a loyal customer base of over 5 million people. Thanks to her long-standing experience and runaway success in the industry, the Ugandan government awarded her company a $4 million grant in February to construct a fresh juice factory in northern Uganda. The government also allocated her another $6 million to procure equipment, with 50% of the funds repayable by her company in 10 years. In addition to that, last year she won a special prize during the 7th edition of UNCTAD's Empathic Women in Business Awards for her dedication to empowering other women through her inclusive business, so the grant was another feather in her cap. In 2011, Miss Omala produced cheers based on imported juice concentrates, partly due to the challenge of sourcing high quality and locally growing fresh fruits. Mama Cheers also aims to increase the number of direct outgrowers to 80,000 farmers and indirect beneficiaries to 432,000 women in the next 3 years. This will ensure a sustainable fruit supply for the new factory to meet local, regional, and international demand. Let's end with one of her quotes. With the new factory, we hope to expand our market to all corners of the world. Her long-term plans include meeting growing market demand from dried fruits, especially mangoes. From Canada, Ontario, Zahra Sada.
We are currently reporting live from the Suez Canal with winds around 19 kilometers per hour. Numerous vessels were stranded due to the occurrence that only concluded just weeks ago. The Suez Canal is a man-made waterway that connects ports set in the Mediterranean Sea with the Gulf of Suez. It was designed to be the most cost-effective sea route between Europe and Asia.
Interestingly enough, the last incident to occur in the Suez Canal was almost 70 years ago, in 1956. This lasted for 8 days and was roughly 80 years after it was built, which was in 1869.
Nicholas, can you please explain exactly what happened in the Suez Canal crisis just weeks ago?
A few weeks ago, the Ever Given ship lost control in the Suez Canal and ended up stranded on both sides. This was due to the lack of vision and the increase of wind speed at 74 kilometers per hour. The wind was very strong, and the length of the boat was a major contribution to them losing control. Because the ship was 400 meters long, there was a larger surface area for the wind to hit and impair their steering. The sand around it was also blown around to impair the vision of the captain and crew members, so they couldn't see as much.
On March 23rd at 7:40 a.m., the Suez Canal crisis began, just for 6 days and 7 hours. The ship was refloated on March 29th at 5:45 p.m. Due to the daily limit of ships the canal is authorized to legally let through, there was still a backlog even 2 weeks after the incident, since there were more ships actually arriving than there were leaving.
Nicholas, how exactly did the crisis affect the world? This crisis affected business on an international scale because of all the resources that were stopped at the canal. When the Ever Given was blocking all the ships from passing it, the blockage prevented $400 million every hour and roughly $9.6 billion every day. The blockage has caused 1.5 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine that were supposed to be sent to Canada delayed for about a few weeks. At this time of crisis, Canada only had 4.3 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Hudson, can you elaborate on how they got the boat out of the canal so then the rest of the goods can be delivered on a global scale?
Initially, the Egyptian government dispatched a fleet of 13 tugboats to try and reposition the Ever Given. Unfortunately, the boat was too large and too heavy to do so. They then started digging sand with excavators near the ship's bow, but the boat was pushed in too deep. The last and most effective attempt was to use natural forces of nature, such as tides. In the canal, high tides occur every 12 hours and 25 minutes, and each time the boat rose, it had the best chance of releasing. The tugboats took advantage of this, and by Sunday, the boat regained its buoyancy.
In addition to this, the Egyptian government tasked the canal authorities with coming up with ideas to reduce the weight on the Ever Given's hull. Some of which were to use cranes to unload some of the containers. This would not work because the containers were too high up for the cranes to reach. They also came up with the idea to use helicopters, but this also would not work because the containers were double-sized, which means that the containers empty still weigh 5,000 pounds, which is too much for the helicopters to try and lift.
Back to you now.
Really good information from our recent reporters. Kai, I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on these subjects. They did make a lot of great points surrounding their topics, but I just hope we can get traveling and get back to our normal life soon to get our economy back on track. What's next on our list today? Next, we will be sending it off to our reporters where they will be discussing our recent environmental updates.
Hello, thank you. This is reporter Denya Mete, and China's plan to build its way out of the backlash caused by the pandemic is met with major consequences by pushing China's carbon emission to new record highs. Late last year, at a virtual gathering hosted by President Joe Biden, Chinese President Xi Jinping has vowed to make his country carbon neutral by 2060.
And all countries must take decisive steps to honor this agreement. China will scale up its intended nationally determined contributions by adopting more vigorous policies and measures. We aim to have CO2 emissions peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060.
The government has also imposed strict climate targets this year, and the local government has rolled out harsh production cuts for heavily polluting industries such as coal and steel. In Tangshan, one of the world's largest steelmaking hubs, recently required steel mills to reduce output by between 30% and 50% for 2021. CO emission for fossil fuels in cement production grew 14.5% in the first quarter of 2021 compared to the previous years. That's the fastest growth in more than a decade. This as a result raised China's emission generated to nearly 12 billion metric tons of carbon emission by the end of March of 2021. In April of this year, President Biden had also promised to cut down 50% of CO2 emissions in the U.S. by 2030, believing that this would motivate China to do more to cut emissions.
The United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation.
But as China's construction activity continues to grow, so does its use of coal, which already accounts for 70% of the growth in emissions in the first quarter. About 60% of the upstick in coal usage came from the power sector. The next two big contributors were the metals and building materials sectors, where activity is increasing because of the demand in real estate projects. As a developing country with lower historical gas levels, China is yet not obligated to make absolute cuts in carbon emission and has a 5-year plan target suggesting that they could rise another 5 to 10% by 2025. That is all. Thank you for listening.
The war on climate change is threatening younger generations around the world, and many wonder if the Canadian government thinks about current effects as opposed to future endeavours. Currently, from a broadcast on April 22nd of this year, Justin Trudeau's goal for Canada aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030 compared to 2005 emission levels. This is a 4 to 9% increase from previous years. Trudeau highlights the importance of methane regulation changes within the country, further motioning to an increase of emission-free vehicles on the road, hoping to provide an example for other countries to follow suit. Though this may seem ambitious, other federal parties such as the federal NDP and the Green Party of Canada are, quote, disappointed and underwhelmed with this announcement, as past urges of 50 to 60% reductions have fallen on deaf ears. This low emission goal is overshadowed by other major powers within the G7, as the United States emission goal lies at just 50 to 52%, with a similar promise from the European Union. The United Kingdom proves even more ambitious with a 78% emission reduction rate by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. It's believed that Canada should focus more of their time towards other aspects of the climate change war, with 95% of Canadians concerned with the plastic pollution crisis. One such way is the proposed introduction of what's known as a circular economy in many large companies. A circular economy is an economic model in which zero waste is created, and every material that moves through it is carefully repaired, reused, or recycled accordingly after being consumed. And this model is a result of many companies operating on circular or closed-loop supply chains. This cycle is thought to continue forever, as there will always be a remnant of the raw material to work with in the beginning. Some examples include organic farmers who use low-waste techniques, delivering non-packaged food directly to the consumer, to which their waste will be composted and sent back to the farmers in form of fertilizers. Another example lies in the many recycling plants found around Canada, which take plastic bottles or cardboard and repurpose them into items like reusable handbags, backpacks, or even bicycles. Some larger-scale companies, like that of Nike or certain products within H&M, have also adopted this circular economic model, with former Nike president and CEO Mark Parker stating that better products can be created with little environmental harm, pulled from a 2015 written report. Unfortunately, many large companies use a linear economic model due to the competitive advantages that they allow, producing cheap or easy-to-make items for little cost and reselling them in everyday objects. Market economies, driven with a buy and consume mindset like those found in the USA, are often the budget contenders for this wasteful style. A linear economic model uses a start-to-finish method, where raw materials are extracted, then supplied to factories for manufacturing. These products are then consumed and disposed of by consumers, to which they'll inevitably land up in landfills or somewhere in the ocean. Since Canada relies on hydroelectricity especially, it's believed that this model can no longer continue should our water remain clean and safe. Currently, Canada only recycles about 9% of plastics consumed and plans to abolish single-use plastics by the end of 2021, though the items on this list to be abolished barely encompass what is used on a day-to-day basis. It's thought that this economic model may reduce manufacturing costs and possibly generate revenue, giving it a hopeful comparative advantage over the current wasteful system and hopefully avoiding a race to the bottom in terms of cheaply made plastic materials. Many youth of Canada have taken special offense to the climate crisis, highlighting the government's negligence of the now and focusing on a seemingly distant future. Despite their claims, they can only lie in wait as to what Canada plans to do exactly in the light of this relatively small plastic-lined step.
Very well said, but what's your opinion on this? I feel that this is a very big topic, and it isn't talked about a lot, but we should definitely be more aware of the world around us so that we can keep our earth happy and healthy. I definitely agree with that. Now for our biggest section yet, we will be sending it off. We will be discussing finance, including lots of information on Bitcoin, the fall of Bitcoin, and the markets around the world.
Could this be the fall of Bitcoin? It's a mystery how Bitcoin came to be. Bitcoin was launched in 2009 by a person or group of people operating under the name Satoshi Nakamoto. Bitcoin was then adopted by a clutch of small enthusiasts. Bitcoin has lost about 40% of its value since April 13th when it hit a high of more than $64,600 per coin. How did this happen? In March, Tesla began accepting Bitcoin as payment. Those actions contributed to the run-up in Bitcoin's price, and Musk also promoted the digital currency Dogecoin, which also spiked in value. Musk announced in February that his electric car company Tesla had invested $1.5 billion in Bitcoin. However, Musk, the CEO of Tesla, reversed his course in just a short time, saying that Tesla would stop accepting Bitcoin because of the potential environmental damage that can result from Bitcoin mining. The announcement set Bitcoin falling below 50,000 and set the tone for a big pullback in most cryptocurrencies. Tesla's decision to not accept digital currencies as a payment for cars, along with concerns about tighter regulations of digital currencies, were major factors in the decline. Following this news, the price of Bitcoin fell after the China Banking Association warned member banks of risks associated with digital currencies. Other digital currencies suffered sharp declines as well. Can Bitcoin pull through this massive drop? The sharp decline in Bitcoin has caused doubt over cryptocurrencies. From where we stand, it appears that many investors are now taking advantage of this disruption to buy the dip. At this time, it is uncertain when Bitcoin will rise again.
The largest cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, is recently under fire for environmental concerns regarding the mining system. CEO of Tesla Elon Musk has stated that he will no longer accept Bitcoin as a means to buy Tesla products. We brought an expert named Matt Georgievic to help us understand exactly what Bitcoin is doing that affects the environment so negatively, and what the future of Bitcoin may look like. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Aiden.
So, Matt, tell me, what exactly is Bitcoin doing that affects the environment so negatively?
Yeah, so a problem Bitcoin is having right now is its insane use of power. It can take as little as 10 minutes to mine one Bitcoin, and in that time, it uses about 72 terawatts. That's not a number you see very often for power, but that's 72 trillion watts. To put that in perspective, the average person uses 17 terawatts in a full year. So it would take above 4 years for someone to use the amount of energy that goes into mining just one Bitcoin. This seems like a terrible amount of electricity, but it gets even worse because about 900 Bitcoin are mined every single day. Of course, all this electricity is bad for the environment, but to top it all off, a large portion of the energy that they are using is coming from dirty energy sources like carbon. With the quality and quantity of energy being used, the environment is suffering, and this has caused for huge concerns moving forward.
Unbelievable numbers, Matt. With that said, the future of Bitcoin is an unstable one, to put it lightly. Bitcoin has become a universally known form of currency in general, as it transcends national economies and is undetectable by governments. It is also equally unsustainable, with the excessive waste of energy it takes to mine it. Since Tesla has dropped Bitcoin as a viable way to purchase products, perhaps other companies may follow. And as we've seen, more cryptocurrencies have emerged. This begs the question, is Bitcoin going to be obsolete? Did Bitcoin just act as a gateway to help cryptocurrency as a whole become popularized? Now that the public and businesses are aware and somewhat familiar of the concept of cryptocurrency, are alternatives to Bitcoin the future?
Yeah, totally. I believe that Bitcoin was a gateway into the world of cryptocurrency, and that it probably won't be able to continue on its current destructive path. Unless Bitcoin makes some big changes in its environmental impact, I just can't see it having success in the future, and it's probably going to become obsolete eventually. That being said, there are many other alternatives that are now gaining some traction without the detrimental effects of Bitcoin. A great example is XLM, which is starting to be used as an intermediary currency for trade. Put into simpler terms, it means that when big corporations or countries are trading different currencies, in between, they will use XLM, and then they'll sell that XLM for their domestic currency. This is much more promising in the world of cryptocurrency because it is a lot better for the environment, first of all, and also it serves an actual purpose outside of the world of cryptocurrency. It serves a purpose in the real world, unlike Bitcoin.
That's good to hear, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, now,
the Doge Father.
Okay, Doge Father. So,
today we'll be talking about Dogecoin. And the Dogecoin is a type of cryptocurrency. So briefly, I'll talk about what a cryptocurrency really is. A cryptocurrency is a digital asset designed to work as a medium of exchange wherein an individual coin ownership records are stored in a ledger existing in a form on a computerized database. Dogecoin is a cryptocurrency with a lot of attention towards it. Today, I will briefly talk about the origins of Dogecoin. Dogecoin is an open source cryptocurrency started in 2013 by Jackson Palmer and Billy Marcus. Dogecoin originally started as a joke-based as it was based on the popular meme featuring a Shiba Inu Japanese breed of dog. It was designed to make fun of all the speculation around all the cryptocurrencies and how it would make jokes at how people kind of would invest in anything if it had a lot of hype.
Dogecoin has had a very turbulent history. One moment the price is skyrocketing all the way to the moon, and the next moment the price is dropping back down to earth. This year has revealed how unstable Dogecoin is, as its very price was dependent on the tweets of a single person. Excluding its creation, this year has been the most important year for Dogecoin. Dogecoin started getting a high level of traction during the GameStop short squeeze at the beginning of January, when a bunch of amateur investors started investing in Dogecoin. That caused the price to rise by 800% in that time frame. And then by April 16th, the price had risen to 45 cents. And not even a month later, on May 4th, the price had risen to 50 cents. It's a 20,000% increase in a year. And the day after, total value of all Dogecoin in circulation was $85 billion. But then Elon Musk went on Saturday Night Live to discuss Dogecoin. And many Dogecoin investors were expecting the price to increase because of this. So they all started selling. And since there are now more people selling than there were buying Dogecoin, the price dropped and is currently clicking to around 35 cents. Two notable purchases that occurred with Dogecoin in this year were a SpaceX rocket launch and 20,000 tickets to a Mavericks basketball game. The future of Dogecoin is quite uncertain because the coin itself is inherently stable due to being dependent on memes and celebrities. On May 25th, Elon Musk tweeted about it, and the price of the coin temporarily shot up. And unlike other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, it doesn't have any mainstream purchasing power, which gives Bitcoin a minimum amount of value and stability.
To add to some future speculations about the coin, I believe as the hype continues to die down and it becomes less of a trend, the price of the coin may also start to drop, as most people see it as not a long-term investment. Also, to counter that, if the coin continues to receive a bunch of publicity and hype from celebrities and influencers, it could also make a rise up in the price. But also, if a company starts to receive it or take it as a payment, then I believe it will be a large increase in the price and the overall stock. But I believe the most likely scenario would to be that it will receive less hype and become less of a trend, and the overall price will just plummet.
So Ava, have you been investing in anything lately? Actually, I have recently, and I've been feeling pretty lucky with my XRP and BNB coin. I'll definitely take a look at those. Now for the topic we've all been waiting for and have missed dearly, sports. We know. We miss it too. So we are going to be passing it to Sam, Carter, Lucy, not a human. Unfortunately, we don't have a Lucy in our class, but Lindsay and Jason will also be talking.
Good morning and welcome back. We're live here in Toronto. I'm Lindsay Chips, and today we're going to take some looks at the updates regarding the Summer Olympics of 2021 in Tokyo, Japan. As you might already know, the Olympics were actually scheduled for the summer of 2020, though the games were postponed due to the COVID-19 outbreak in March, in hopes that the pandemic situation and cases and safety would be better. The Olympics are now in 2021, and they've chosen to brand as if it was still in 2020. It has been unclear for months now whether or not they will still undergo with the ongoing pandemic and lots of different members needing to come to the Olympics, such as the 15,000 Olympians, coaches, healthcare, media, judges, and all coming from 196 countries. Many people are heavily concerned about the spread of the virus and the dangers it could produce. That being said, the International Olympic Committee has limited spectators and international traveling so that they can narrow down the numbers of people that are inside the building and inside the arenas. Even with these restrictions, we can still see a growing number of people wanting to cancel the Olympics. The International Olympic Committee, International Paralympic Committee, Japanese government, Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and Tokyo Organizing Committee of the Olympics and Paralympic Games are all for the follow-through with the Olympics. But there has been petitions that have been put in place that have reached worldwide and grown lots of awareness about canceling the pandemic. Out of 500,000 people goal of signing the petition, 400,000 people signed a petition in order to cancel the 2021 Olympics. And this was found on change.org. Kenji Utsunomiya, a Japanese lawyer who graduated from the University of Tokyo, is the organizer and maker of this petition, who has created actually other websites in order to educate others on why it is important that we take precaution to canceling the Olympics. Switching over to more current events, the Japanese cases have been more on the rise than ever recently, and this isn't good because the Olympics are supposed to take place in only 9 weeks, from July 23rd to August 8th. They put out a 4-level warning for travel warning to the Japan from the US, just because of how high the cases were. So this has definitely taken a threat and made others think twice about traveling and whether or not they should attend the Olympics as Olympians and coaches due to the pandemic. After the warning was put out, Japan has increased their rates of vaccination in order to try and keep the games from happening. And this definitely took them to a surprise. But they are trying to get their cases low and fast so that they can hold the games within 9 weeks. And then controversy has also aroused because new variants have been found that are both affecting vaccinated and unvaccinated people. And even with the increasing vaccination rates in Japan, many are still questioning whether or not they'll be safe with the new variants that are found. Despite all the uncertainties, John Coates, the vice president of the International Olympic Committee, has stated that no matter what the situation, it will still go ahead, even if Japan is in the state of an emergency. So now I bring to you, what do you think? Is COVID bigger than the Olympics? I'm Lindsay Chips. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 8.
Breaking news. We are here live at Burlington Golf and Country Club, where the golf ban in Ontario has been recently lifted. We'd also like to acknowledge and congratulate Phil Mickelson on winning his 6th major this past weekend in the PGA Tour and becoming the oldest to do so.
Golf has always been a popular game amongst Ontarians, even more so during the pandemic. Ontario's COVID-19 advisory table has determined that golf is safe as it is a naturally socially distanced sport. Additionally, they concluded that less than 10% of transmissions actually occur outdoors. The calls of the advisory table and golfers province-wide have been answered, and as of May 22nd, golfers have been back to doing what they love most.
Ontario is the only place in the whole world that decided to shut down golf and the rules of their lockdown. Premier Doug Ford said, "They pick up another buddy, 2 or 3, go out. Go golfing." There's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with going golfing. The problem is, after they golf, they go back and have some pops. That's the problem.
We were able to catch up with local golfer Warren Goldblatt to get his thoughts before the reopening. Here's what he had to say. "This was the first time in my life where a government actually had control over my happiness. I felt powerless, and I believe it was a very unjust situation as they weren't following the science. It was a political decision. It was a decision that didn't consider the feelings or the well-being of people." I think he speaks for the rest of the golfing community with those remarks.
I also had the chance to speak to a local clothing store owner on how business was affected as one of their biggest income is from golf attire. Jeff Cooling, owner of Jeff's Guy Shop, said, "Sales of golf clothing were going very slow during the course closures. There wasn't a need from the consumer for new gear. As soon as the restrictions were lifted, we noticed a considerable increase in golf-related items." More in the news, pro-Canadian golfer Brooke Henderson stated that she hoped that golf would reopen in Ontario, and she was quite confused by the original decision of shutting it down.
The beauty of outdoor activities like golf is that it allows us to escape the frustration and anxiety that the pandemic brings. According to Golf Magic, a staggering 98% of golfers claim that golf helped relieve stress and improve their mental health, which has become increasingly important due to this lockdown. Whether it be huge income losses or simply wanting to be back out on the course again, golf club owners and golfers alike have felt the impacts of the closure on golf. Thankfully, things have reopened, which will hopefully be the beginning of better things to come.
Some people see golf as just a fun activity, but it's surprisingly a large chunk of countries' revenues, and there's a lot of money in the sport. Golf itself generates roughly $20 billion here in Canada that contributes to our GDP, and is considered an $85 billion industry worldwide. That's a huge business to shut down for a month, and golf already doesn't operate in the winter, so it takes out a large toll of the revenue and our economy.
That's exactly right, Carter. Golf is more significant than many would think to our economy. Golf Canada has employed roughly 250,000 employees in 2019. Golf also contributes to almost $500 billion in household income. Here's what the regional breakdown by province looks like. Here in Ontario, we generate roughly $6 billion per year through golf. In BC, it's around 3.4. In Quebec, it's 2.9. Alberta, 2.4. Atlantic Canada, they generate roughly 932 million. In Manitoba, it's around 475. In Saskatchewan, it's 415. And lastly, in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, they generate roughly $45 million through golf.
Many clubs near us here in Burlington were affected by the shutdown as well. A few examples are Camile, whose prices have gone up from $25 to $30 for 9-hole, and Millcroft Golf Club, who is even rumored to be taken away and used for housing. The only club that may have positively benefited is Burlington here, who has been going through major renovations for the past year and has had some extra time to fix up some areas. But they still were not making enough revenue just from the food services they provide without golf.
The past few weeks have been long and frustrating for everyone involved, but finally, our calls for the reopening have been answered. Now it's your responsibility to prove our provincial government right. It's more important now than ever to follow safety protocols, wear a mask, but most importantly, enjoy being back out on the course.
Thanks guys, I appreciate it. So I'm out here at the studio right now, and the latest breaking news in the soccer world has just come in. The largest global sport is under immense heat as proposals for the European Super League circulate around the world. The Super League will consist of 12 of the wealthiest soccer teams in Europe, which will be guaranteed a spot no matter their domestic club performance. We've got AC Milan, Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Chelsea, Inter Milan, Juventus, Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Real Madrid, and definitely least, as an Arsenal fan, we've got Tottenham. Now with support from US investment bank JP Morgan Chase and others, each club is guaranteed around a whopping $4.2 billion per season, growing to at least a even whoppier $12 billion over the next 23 years. These numbers tower over any reward from similar competition Champions League or any domestic club performance. Now, while the Champions League focuses on choosing the teams with the top domestic club performance across Europe, the Super League founded teams do not risk disqualification and are guaranteed a spot in the league no matter their performance. This may give the league a lack of competition and may reduce the incentive to play top-level soccer. Now, the phrase created by the poor, stolen by the rich has been gaining popularity as fans begin to accuse the Super League club owners of selling out and throwing away their incredible club history. Even former soccer player and current commentator Gary Neville has deemed the Super League an attempted murder on football. Now, what's the issue with this Michael Myers of a league? Well, the main issue with this proposal is that many lower league teams that are struggling financially due to COVID-19, they need support to stay afloat. Now, these lower league teams are the foundation of the high tier leagues as they bring in young players and build them into superstars to work their way up the ranks. However, as the Super League takes billions and billions of dollars for themselves, the focus is being taken away from these smaller clubs and they are forced to fold. As the foundation of soccer collapses, it has the potential to ripple through the hierarchy and cause greater devastation. That's the problem. Think of it as an apartment building. If you knock out the bottom 2 floors, the rest of it is going to fall down with it. Now, sports are built off of history. You got the classic rivalries, the underdog stories, and the players that no one's ever heard of, but end up just shocking the world. Fans are claiming that these 12 teams in the Super League are tossing away all of this for money. Some say it's greed, others say it's just business. Now, as this story progresses, it will be important to pay attention to how the fans react and see how the club owners respond to their concerns. Make sure you guys tune into tomorrow night's episode to see more about how this interesting story unfolds. Back to you guys.
Amazing.
Give a round of applause for our brilliant reporters.
Amazing. Well, it sucks to see that we've been without our favorite sports and players. Even though our home team can't even make it past first round most of the time.
We still hope that we'll get back to normal sooner than later. Well, that brings us to the end of our Warren Talk 1010 for this evening, folks.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We've had a blast, and we hope you enjoyed and learned from all the information today.
And we would like to give a big thanks to our brilliant reporters for bringing in some excellent information today and giving us all the stuff that we need.
Cheers.
Cheers.